I'm not an animal. I'm not a criminal. I don't want you to approach me as a manner that I've done something already wrong. It's thousands of people out there that get speeding tickets on a day-to-day basis. So I know police officers are not walking to every car. Like this man told me, he walks up to every car with his hand on his gun. And it was so hard for me to believe that. So he switched his story around, and that's when I felt like, I was like, this guy is one of the cops that people are talking about.
I know people have a tendency to talk about the laws in this country and whether they're going to change. The work that I'm doing is centered mainly on law enforcement itself, that front line of the judicial system. So what I'm looking for is not so much changing of laws, but changing how law enforcement interacts with Black and brown communities, and that comes through training. And the training, in my opinion, needs to be more about decision making, deciding on how to solve a problem without using enforcement, the de-escalation, understanding the communities and the neighborhood. So I'm not so in tune so much about laws. It's about the training in law enforcement and learning how to make better decisions and using de-escalation. Today is a new day, which means we all have a new opportunity to create change and to make a positive difference. While we're still dealing with the past and the consequences of this nation's wrongs, it will take all of us coming together to solve problems. Why? Because we're all humans who live here together. I'm in the South. In the South, where the history of law enforcement roots run deep in the abuse and violations of Black and brown bodies, and that's a mild description. Though it is impossible to undo the past, society has an obligation to acknowledge the truth, repair the damage, and apply lessons learned to avoid repeating the same mistakes. In the spirit of compromise and progress, there is much to be gained by identifying a mutual point of agreement, which is that no one individual, organization, or community will solve this problem alone. It is, and will continue to be, a collaborative effort. As a starting point, we must agree that in a democratic society of law and order, there is a need for law enforcement agencies and police officers who protect and serve in an equitable manner and who earn and maintain the trust and respect of all people. Today, I'm working hard to help primarily Black and brown people understand that while the challenges are real, the problems have evolved and we're no longer dealing with our ancestors' system of law enforcement. It is not an easy task to bring together the Black, white, and brown descendants of today to correct the mistake that others who are long gone made. But that is the task before us. You know, you're thinking, we're human beings and we all come from different journeys and have different views. I wanted to hear from mothers and understand the concerns they have for their children when they walk out the door. These three mothers represent different walks of life, but all share the same concerns.
I always tried to have a good relationship with the police officers. I try not to have too many negative encounters because I know kids feed off your energy. Mm-hmm. But I have also had to learn, 2016, my youngest daughter's dad died in custody of law enforcement. So the way they treated me changed my whole perspective of law enforcement. So it was always, man, I don't respect no cops and all of this, that, and the third. You know, I always had that negative image every time I seen a cop. And then when I've noticed my youngest daughter and my kids was like, 12 and shooting middle fingers at 12 and stuff like that, I realized then I have to change my mentality because everybody didn't take his life or everybody wasn't responsible for it. But I had to pause because I was like that. I'm not even going to lie, a whole year I had that mentality like I can't stand the police, like I hate the police, and I didn't realize that my kids was picking up on how they picked up on my energy. So I had to reprogram my kids and be like, look.
Wow.
And just from seeing our community engagement unit in our community and talking to our kids and, I had to really deprogram my kids off that negative mentality of the police because I have a young Black son. So I really had to sit back and be like, hold up, this, my energy is, my kids are going to match my energy, and what if I'm not with my kids one day and they react the way I react? It might not go as easy for me as it would for, for them.
My son had a situation. He had just turned 12, I think. He just turned 13, and a police officer snatched him off his bike, and the police officer thought that he was somebody else, but it wasn't. He was 13, so I felt at the time like I was being intimidated by the police because they was much bigger than me, they was powerful than me. I was a little woman and trying to defend my son, and it's hard when they don't really listen to you. They already set in their mind on how they feel about you and your son.
All police officers aren't bad, and I don't have the same experience. I thank God that I don't, and so the encounters that I've had, all my children have had, it's been positive. I got a call, and he was being a teenager, and but when they stopped him, they said they could tell he come from a good home, or whatever that means. You know what I mean? Because he was very respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. And so they knew that he was just being a teenager, frontal lobe wide open. And they called us, and it was a positive experience. But I do understand that doesn't always happen. But because my sons have locks. And so you have that stereotype of what locks are. Some people have that narrative of what students with, or black males with locks, or people with locks. They have their own image of who they are, who they think they are, right? Exactly. And so by I having black sons, I don't want them to be approached in a way that they're not, just because they have locks, or because they're wearing a hoodie, or because they're or whatever the case, whatever you think,
riding a moped,
or walking through the yard, through a community with Skittles and a soda, right? And then we know how that turned out. So we can't overlook the parents' responsibility in this.
And I'm glad you said that too, because as a parent and a recovering addict, a lot of my behaviors I showed my kids in the same thing that you were saying about the behaviors and the way that I reacted to the police when they came, or even if I seen them, I would be scared because I knew I was out there doing something that I shouldn't have been doing. But for my kids to see how I reacted to them, it gave them a idea on how they should act.
Like permission.
Right. Yeah. So once I changed my life around, I had to change the way I treated the police too, and the way they treat me back. Because they look at me different now, because I'm not that same person no more. And that's how we can help some of these parents in these projects that's struggling with abuse, drug abuse, helping them help their kids.
I'm doing this work because I'm trying to do my part to help save lives. In law enforcement, we have a lot of information and a lot of data. The statistics confirm that not resisting is the key to improving the rate of safe encounters. For police officers, anything deemed as resistance can potentially become a threat. So I tell to young people, please don't run from the police, even if you're scared, and even if you have or haven't done anything wrong. Running is resisting, and resisting can turn deadly. During my training with law enforcement and with citizens, we focus on making common sense problem solving a priority and prioritize training officers to use non-lethal actions whenever safe and possible to de-escalate situations and solve problems rather than just enforce laws. We talk to young people about respect and cooperation, learning how to effectively communicate and de-escalate situations. First and foremost, the priority is survival. We just want everyone to get home. This partnership between law enforcement and the community, especially in the South, demonstrates that we need to understand our history, but it's also time to create a new history around human beings talking to other human beings about how to solve problems and how to make life better for everyone. As a 30-year veteran in law enforcement, I invited a few police chiefs to talk about their work in community policing and to share what they see as the key problems on the front lines and give them the chance to offer some solutions. They are leaders in diverse organizations and represent the evolution and changes that are taking place in law enforcement. Not only are they Black police chiefs, but they are also fathers who share the same concerns as other parents.
I work with officers, and I've been a chief for a while. And what I found is this, is that not every white officer is racist.
Right.
And not every Black officer is a good cop, right? I found that people are just that, they're human beings. I've literally seen officers who I know would give you every bit of himself if you needed it. Have a bad day and have a disciplinary problem, right? But I know this officer's not racist. This officer, the last thing on this officer's mind is that topic, but he came to work having a bad day.
Exactly.
Or he came to work after having an argument with his wife. And I think it's incumbent upon us as supervisors, and not just the chief, but the sergeants, the corporals, the lieutenants, to recognize somebody's not normal today. And you know, and kind of recognize that, and maybe pull them aside before they go out there. Because I've had an officer explode. One who I thought was the calmest, never raises his voice, but the accumulation of the calls that day, the family stress and the situations that were going on at home. When he got to his last call, that was kind of the final straw, and he just snapped. And we all were looking at the video like, oh my God. And it wasn't nothing too bad. He didn't put his hand, but he gave somebody a verbal lashing. But there are consequences to be paid for that, right? And we're going to fulfill and follow through on those consequences. But when I talk to the citizens sometimes, well, they need to be fired. No, they don't. No. They don't need to be fired. This guy he's human just like you. You ever flipped out on your boss before? Sure, she has. And so, and we're talking a lot, you know, in that aspect, but I'm explaining to her, look, this officer, we're going to do our due diligence. This officer is going to be held accountable for his actions. And these things aren't acceptable under policy, right? However, this officer is not a bad officer. Do we need to talk about retraining? Maybe even some counseling, some things like that? Sure. But not everybody needs to be fired.
That's right.
And so it's hard for the community to understand that, you know what, I'm a human being. And if me and my wife had a bad morning this morning, that's going to be reflective for a couple of hours in my personality. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard for people to understand that, but I have those kind of conversations with people when they call, in previous agencies, they call some of my cops racist, and I went, that guy's not racist. Number one, he's married to an African-American female.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
History.
Exactly. You don't know his history.
And so you have to break it down that way.
I would say definitely since the murder of George Floyd, everything is definitely even more tense in terms of the community and, you know, how they feel the interaction should be done with law enforcement. So George Floyd by far has, you know, created that magnifying glass. I think during our term, it was the Rodney King incident. You know, but now George Floyd has definitely put that at the forefront. And so you have this community of new generation of activists and those that, you know, with the Black Lives Movement, you know, want to make these changes, you know, but they have to understand these changes has to be together with law enforcement and engagement, you know, all this, you know, defunding the police and everything else, all those type of discussions, but there needs to be some afterthought as to how we're going to do this.
What I saw during the movement and during the protests of young African-American men and women protesting, what I saw was an opportunity to say, hey, if you want to affect change, I got 16 openings. Come be a part. Help change the solution. Because this profession, you know, is a mostly white male predominant profession, not by choice. It's, you know, sometimes people, you know, growing up for me, had I listened to my grandmother, who was raised in Lombard, North Carolina, Scotland County, I would have never become the police because of her experiences. We have to learn them. We have to interact with different races to understand their background, to figure out why they're not coming to police. But during the George Floyd, for me as a chief, that was a perfect time to say, okay, community, you say you want to affect change. Okay, as long as you meet the criteria, you're 19 years old, You can pass the bill, AT. I have a job for you.
I think every black parent has had the talk or is going to have the talk with their children about how to act and what to do when they're stopped by the police. From my perspective, here's what the talk should include. Respecting the officer's authority even if you know or feel they're violating your rights. Remember, the goal is to survive the interaction and get home. Next, have friends record the interaction from several feet away if they are not involved in the encounter. Always keep your hands visible so you are not perceived as a threat to the officer's life or safety. That means, at a minimum, hands should be held at head level. Please follow instructions and cooperate with basic instructions. Don't escalate the situation. Know your rights. You only have to answer the basic questions: name, date of birth, and correct address. Then show the necessary paperwork requested, like your driver's license and vehicle registration. You have the right to answer any other questions, and you have the right to ask for an attorney if you don't want to answer additional questions. Be sure to tell the officer that you're reaching to get the necessary paperwork when asked. Minimize movement by everyone in the vehicle to help maintain a sense of calm and cooperation. During the interaction, remain in the vehicle. You should only exit the vehicle when asked to do so by the officer. If you are asked by the officer to get out of the vehicle, by law, you are required to do so. Get out slowly, close the vehicle door, and continue to cooperate with the officer's instructions. You have the right to verbally refuse a request to search the vehicle, but still must cooperate if officers proceed with the search. The driver of the vehicle should be the only one engaging with the officer, but if the officer engages with other vehicle occupants, they should cooperate as well. It is important to remain calm, composed, and cooperative so everyone can get home safely. Last, after an encounter, understand there are processes in place to file complaints for unprofessionalism to hold law enforcement accountable to the communities they serve. But first and foremost, the priority is to get home. I met C. Von Zell as part of my outreach to the community and was intrigued by his story and how his views of the police have changed over the course of his life. We had a powerful conversation about the significance of learning how to see past the labels and the badges and to focus on the human being in front of us.
So my first introductory to an encounter with the police was listening to NWA, and it came on the sirens, the song F the Police. It had the sirens that came on with the song. And I remember being a little kid, 10 years old maybe, and hearing the song and gravitating to the message of the song to identify that this song meant pay attention to the police. And so from that song and from that video, watching that, being a first generation hip hop kid, watching that video and hearing that song, now I identify the police as being the police. And so I paid more attention from the video to, okay, this is the police right here riding by in this car. And we gotta be careful at all times, as even kids, because the police are not our friends. The police is basically an enemy of our neighborhood. By the age of 17, I was wanted for a shooting that I was a part of. And so my first encounter as a 17-year-old teenager was entering into the juvenile system. So to enter into the juvenile system, that encounter with the police is much more different because the system lets you know that this is a bad position for you to be in. And so as you enter into it, the police let you know that you're in a bad position to be here. And I think it's a scare tactic for kids to not come back. Officer Gregg was a friend of my mom's, and she told Officer Gregg, I want you to scare Cedric. I want you to come and pick him up and take him with you, so as a form of a scare tactic. But Officer Gregg, in our mind, was the coolest guy, and I completely forgot about that experience with Officer Gregg being this black man, this handsome black man. Probably was trying to talk to my mom, you never know, but this handsome black man. And you know, he was the first person I could say that I saw a black man that was a police. That was a disarming experience, because he did pay attention to us. He did talk to us. He had conversations with us. But then I think for us in the neighborhood, as a young person, to have encounter with white police was the enemy or the opposition, because Police Gregg was our friend. But Wise, the white guy, Officer Wise, the white police, wasn't our friend in our minds. If I pay attention to the media, then my perception of law enforcement is negative. But in my own personal experiences, I've found a way to see people inside of that experience and attempt to get to know the people. And because that is something that I've made an attempt to do, just because my new mission is to influence or empower black men. I ran into some black men that were officers, and I started to engage with them, and I had never really did that before, because I always saw them as, I always saw the badge, I always saw the clothes, I always saw the car. I never really associated them as being just like me. I didn't see them in the eyes of the way I would see me or my friends. And so just of late, wanting to communicate more so with officers that were just black men. I wanted to communicate with the black man behind the badge and the black woman behind the badge. And so that's new for me. That's as of like this year. And so before that, I think I had the same mentality that the media wanted to portray to me. Like, I had the mentality that all polices were bad and they all had evil intentions for our community, particularly if they were white. Like, just immediately, okay, you're police, you're racist, because you're white, you want to harm me. And so, but then I think the more I matured and the more I started to look beyond the badge and take a good look inside the eyes of the person and have a conversation, and as simple as saying hello, because I had never did that before. I had never simply said, hey, how you doing, brother? And he said, hey, man, how you doing? How your day going? So I never had a conversation.
Their anger with the system itself is never a priority for me in these discussions. I tell them in the very beginning, you can still leave this conversation angry with law enforcement. The priority is getting home. Black and brown communities are fearful, and just accept that and acknowledge that fear and recognize that and try to do their best as well as do their jobs to understand that in this moment. What I want parents and individuals to understand, I need them to understand, I want them to get home, and that is the priority. And for the parents to tell them that no matter what they may be doing or may have done, the priority is to get home. Every day is a new day and a new opportunity to get closer to finding solution. This work I'm doing with UN50 is all about respect, knowing your constitutional rights, understanding how to file complaints if you experience unprofessional behavior, and understanding that police officers are simply doing a job. What we want is for you to get home, to live another day, and pursue your dreams and to fulfill your life's purpose in this world. Everybody involved is just another human being who wants to get home.
When you have nothing else to give, no, and don't know what you're fighting for, yeah. When it feel like you lost your will and don't know what you're crying for, know what you're crying for, yeah. Just stand up when you don't know what to tell your kids, when you just want them to make it home. Seem like the world is turned upside down. Just pray to God He won't leave you alone. And stand up, don't give in to the pain. And stand up, even when it pours and rains. And stand up, you'll see the sun again. If you just stand, let us live and not die. Let us come home at night. Yeah. Let us teach our kids. To know what's wrong and what's right. Yeah. Teach them to share their light. Teach them to hold on tight. And teach them to never give in.